Today we're gonna be the Blood Dusk. Yeah, we're gonna be delving into some articles. Will the Duskblood eventually launch on PS5 and PC? The Duskbloods will likely never launch on PS5 and PC. It's because unlike PlayStation and Xbox, Nintendo is more reluctant to release its first and second party title on rival platforms. Nintendo has shown no signs of changing its decade-old formula of launching games exclusively on its platform. Guys, I have some terrible news. Let's watch that. This is actually terrible.
Let's talk about the Duskbloods first of all, John. Thoughts?
Wow, so this is really interesting because this seems to be a From Software Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. Information afterward that I saw from Jason Schreier suggests that this is actually more of a multiplayer game, which if this is just multiplayer focused, then my interest tanks a little bit. But I'm still curious to see what they do with it, given how they've turned a lot of single player things on their head. So maybe, aside from Night Rain, which they're also doing, they seem to have a bee in their bonnet regarding multiplayer stuff lately for some reasons.
In terms of the just general metrics here, Tom counted it out, I believe, as a 1080p title in every shot here, which is it's pretty good for a title like this, I suppose. It does have very minimal AA treatment, though. It looks pretty raw. There's a lot of like specular aliasing and stuff like that in some of these darker scenes. There is some SSR, which is a nice touch, and there's also some volumetric fog, it looks like, which is a little bit aliased there.
I'm just been going step by step through the video because I haven't done the performance testing on this yet, and it does seem to be just like properly paced 30 frames per second.
Right. Unusual.
Which is unusual for a From Software game. But I guess there'll be some performance capture possibly running as I talk, because I'm going to do it directly after we film this. We shall know one way or the other. But let's talk about Elden Ring here, which I have done the performance capture on, but I think we should probably put a big stamp on it saying something like compromised capture. Here's the thing, like whenever we do a performance capture from our own sources, right, we know that it's a good feed. This doesn't look like a good feed. The first impressions are really poor. It looks juddery and bad. And yet for the most part, it seems to be running at 30 frames per second. There are some dips in there, as you'll see with the video that's running here. But for the most part, it does seem to be 30 FPS. But I think it is running unlocked. And I think that From Software or whoever has decimated the capture down from a 60 FPS capture to a 30 FPS one that has then been reinserted into a 60 FPS container. Because what's happening here is that the camera movement is completely balked, super choppy. It's not looking great, is it? Yes, so that is odd. But the pixel count, which is quite impressive, is coming in at 1920 by 1080.
Oh, there you go. 30 FPS Duskblood. At least according to what was shown. Well, I mean, it's not really surprising. It's just that, logically speaking, unless they don't know what they're doing, at Nintendo, usually you showcase the game at its highest possible frame rate. So the fact that they showcased it at 30 pretty much means that the game is going to be a 30 FPS game. So that's that, which is pretty fucking horrible. It's one thing. Maybe it was not docked. Yeah. It's unfortunate, really. That's a big rip, dude. Well, I think a lot of people are going to be turned off by this. It's going to be hard to warrant a buy now for anyone, really. Yeah, On Gun, I'm reading what you're saying. Hopefully you're going to be able to play Duskblood at 60 FPS if you set the game to 720p on the Switch, because you can set the game to 720p. I'm wondering though if the 30 FPS 1080p is not the docked version and the fucking handheld version is actually 720p 30 FPS. Oh man, that is pretty terrible, honestly. Upscalers will fix everything. Apparently there was no no showcase of any upscaler during this presentation. I mean, hopefully you're right, but it's not looking good right now. So basically, for those who came in, we just watched this segment of Digital Foundry talking about some of the new revealed titles for the Nintendo Switch 2. And they're basically confirming that the internal frame rate for the showcase of the game was 30 FPS, which means that the game is likely, the Duskblood is likely going to be a 30 FPS game. It's not completely confirmed yet, but let's say that it's heavily leaning toward that. I'm going to be like on the fence about getting this because I don't want to play a multiplayer game at 30 FPS. Like, I'm past that. Like, I don't want this anymore. This is not something that I'm looking forward to. If the game was 60, you know, I could make the sacrifice of going to Switch, but if it's 30 FPS and I have to buy a new console to play something at 30 FPS, it's a hard pass, man. Very hard to justify that. Very unfortunate. Also, from I was reading this earlier from this article here, which is basically the almighty interview that Nintendo was kind of teasing when they announced this game with Miyazaki. So there's something that Miyazaki says in this, that this title was originally created to be a multi-platform title and was adapted to the Switch, basically, because Nintendo probably offered a massive deal. Let's just take a look real quick at some of the info that was in this article. I'll just say right now, this article is like, I don't know who the interviewer is, but it's like one of the most horrible interview I've ever read. Like, it's basically just a bunch of glazing questions that answer basically nothing. Like, who is the rat-looking character at the end? Like, no one gives a shit, dude. Like, just ask him, will the game eventually become multi-platform? Like, ask him what is the fucking frame rate that people can expect to play this game on. Like, they didn't ask any relevant question, it's just glazing questions. Please tell us what led to this title being developed for Nintendo Switch. That's a good question. A while back, we had an opportunity to meet with Nintendo, discuss idea, and during this discussion, we presented a rough outline for the Duskblood. It was still very bare bone at the time, more loose strings of ideas with proper presentation. More than a proper presentation. The concept itself was different from anything we had done before. Nintendo seemed very interested in helping make it a reality, so when the project kicked off, at first it was being worked on by a small team as a title for Nintendo Switch. However, just as the game started to take shape, we were approached by Nintendo with talk of Switch 2. So actually, never mind, it was worked for the base Switch at first, and then it was moved to be a Switch 2 title. So could you imagine this would have been a Switch title? Like this right here, a Switch title? Could you imagine a multiplayer game with the current Switch? That sounds a little crazy. That's confusing, man. That is crazy. What the hell? Well, at least if it was developed for the Switch, which is what it says here, was worked on by a small team as a title for Nintendo Switch. Well, at least they had really bad fucking hardware in mind when they developed this. Like, really bad hardware. However, just as the game started to take shape, we were approached by Nintendo with talk of Switch 2, which led us to revamp our development path with this new hardware in mind. This new hardware's focus on online features that allowed us to stay true to the original vision as much as possible, which was very good news for us. I find this kind of confusing because on one hand here, you have a multiplayer focused title originally designed for one of the worst multiplayer capable platform out there, if not the worst, actually. You know, there's an argument that this might actually be the worst multiplayer platform or platform that you could make a multiplayer game. So it was designed for the base Switch. I find this completely crazy. I don't know about you guys. And then, you know, they went ahead and announced them that they were gonna release a Switch 2, so that's crazy. You think I'm just hating? I don't know if you're being serious or not. I keep seeing people repeat the 30 FPS. You were under the impression that Switch 2 was 60? Yeah. Bloodborne runs at 3 FPS and it seems fine to you. Okay. Night Train should have been the Switch exclusive, to be honest, not this. Yeah, I agree, Ungun. Man, not gonna lie, it's hard to not be disappointed. And for those of you who've played Bloodborne, you know, we played Bloodborne back on PS4. Basically, Bloodborne on PS4, the online aspect, you know, the multiplayer part of it was pretty unplayable for those who've played it, whether it's at launch or afterward. You know, the low FPS made the desync in that game multiplayer-wise to be kind of jarring. Like, there was never any notion of spacing in Bloodborne because the desync is just too large, mostly due to the high latency between the two players. That's related to the low FPS. So when you're talking about 30 FPS for a multiplayer, legitimately it is unplayable. You know, I want to believe that this is possible to run at 60, but we have very little to go off that indicates that we have confirmation that the trailer showcased the internal resolution, or sorry, the internal resolution is 1080p, and then the internal frame rate is 30 FPS. So that's really bad news. Yeah, Smoke. Basically, Digital Foundry, when doing their usual trailer analysis, they've confirmed that the internal frame rate of the showcase for Duskblood is 30 FPS, which is not surprising, unfortunately, and likely indicates that this will be a 30 FPS title. It's one thing to release Bloodborne at 30 FPS, whereas Bloodborne released 10 years ago. Wow. Bloodborne released a the last From Software 30 FPS game was 10 years ago. And it was not multiplayer focused. I mean, even myself, who is a multiplayer focused person, you know, I mostly play Bloodborne for the single player and to enjoy the single player. Whereas Duskblood here is really a multiplayer focused title, as this interview suggests as well. And so, you know, you're 10 years down the line and you re-release a 30 FPS title for a multiplayer game. Honestly, if possible, like, I think it might be worth it to send a message to FromSoft that, you know, we don't want that, because that's just horrible. Like, you don't want them going down that path of, like, lowering standards like that. That's just clueless at this point. I mean, technically, it's not, like, a hard confirmation yet. Like, we don't know, like, 100% if this will be 30 FPS. There's still, you know, a slim chance that some docked version 720p DLSS will be able to run it at 60. Like, technically, that's still a possibility, but it's a pretty low possibility at this point. As you guys probably realize, when you showcase a trailer, you showcase it in its best possible state, the best possible state of the game, which means, you know, that when games release on PC, you showcase games basically on a 4090, a 5090, you know, at steady 60 FPS or steady 120 FPS when you announce stuff like that. But in the case of this game, they're announcing this game on Switch 2 at 30 FPS. It's really unfortunate because, you know, From Software had very little wind behind them for this game. And what I mean by that is, you know, all the casuals that you read on Reddit were not thrilled. And, you know, these casuals include even Digital Foundry, because they don't play multiplayer much, at least not this guy, and he was not thrilled that this was a multiplayer title. And when you go on Reddit and you read a lot of people, they basically feel the same. So From Software did not have a lot of wind behind them when announcing this concept. Yet there was some of the hardcore From Software player base like us, which are interested in the PvPvE title, which were really excited about this announcement. But From Software is making it very hard to be excited for this when this game is 30 FPS. They're really making it hard. Will it be a Switch exclusive forever? When is the Duskblood coming to PS5 and PC? Will the Duskblood eventually launch on PS5 and PC? The Duskblood will likely never launch on PS5 and PC. Because unlike PlayStation and Xbox, Nintendo is more reluctant to release its first and second party titles on rival platforms. Although I'll be honest with you, this article is basically a just a theory. Like, there's nothing that's actually information about this. It's just them theory crafting why it won't release on other platforms. Jumping to conclusions on the FPS already is kind of crazy. I think, like, when the game gets showcased at 30 FPS and then assuming that it's a 30 FPS game, I don't think it's crazy. I think it's reasonable assumptions. Like, honestly, at this point, like, you have to be really fucking deep in From Software's asshole to, like, be coping about this. Like, you have to be really deep. Like, we can't reach you. Like, you're in the dark in there. Casuals aren't seeing the problem. They see PvP as the problem instead of the Switch exclusivity FPS Switch Wi-Fi. That's crazy, Ungun. You know that's crazy. Nintendo will probably sue you for trying to emulate it. Casuals will play at 1 FPS, 144p. Just God forbid it has PvP. Man. Do you think FromSoft got paid in advance and gets nothing from copies sold? Or do you think FromSoft will get money based on copies sold? I'm gonna be honest, I'm not familiar with how these sort of contracts are laid out. I would be surprised if they have like contracts like that where they get nothing for copies sold. That would be pretty crazy, but I'm assuming they probably had a very substantial amount of money for that exclusivity deal. An amount of money that probably accounts for the fact that this game won't be popular. So basically, they're still gonna make they're still gonna make a lot of money from this project, regardless if it sells well or not. But I assume if it sells well, FromSoft will also reap the benefit from that. I don't think I've ever heard of a game that doesn't make money if it sells well, or doesn't lose money if it sells poorly. I think they're still going to be affected, but because this exclusivity deal probably cost Nintendo a lot, I think FromSoft is gonna make buck on this no matter what. People also think Night Train is gonna have crazy variety on launch, despite the network test having like 2 seeds. Gonna be Demon's Souls remake all over again, where no one is gonna have like Switch 2 because of scalpers. You know what, FIFO? That's a good point, but Demon's Souls remake came out at PlayStation 5 launch, whereas Duskblood comes out like a year after the Switch 2 launch, which is, you know, a significant amount of time. Now, will the scalpers scalp the Switch 2 for a full year? Maybe. That's definitely possible. Tirico, thanks for the Twitch Prime resub for 40 months, man. I only see the Switch being the problem here. Yeah, Ongun, honestly, like, if I was From Software, I think I would want to release this on other platforms, but now that they have an exclusivity deal, you know, I'm not even sure if this allows them. If it's time exclusive, sure. Like, I think we will wait. If it's a time exclusive, I think anyone that's reasonable will wait, not buy a Switch 2, unless they were already planning to buy one. and then, you know, get this game on PC or PlayStation or Xbox, or, you know, a platform that allows for better performance, basically. But as of right now, all we know is that this is a Switch 2 exclusive. This was announced, showcased as a 30 FPS title, not completely confirmed, but let's say very strong possibility. We're leaning toward 30 FPS here, which is very unfortunate. You can't see a ton of people who only play games like Mario and Pokemon on Switch being interested in this. You know, Mook, that's a very good point, because I was watching some YouTube vids about like you know, Nintendo like hardcore fanboys, right? And like they were going over the entire event and all the games that were announced, and the games that they were most interested in were basically like Donkey Kong and like Mario Kart World. And they were like, oh, you know, that's interesting, whatever, you know, DUSKBLOOD. And, you know, they didn't really care, just basically like what you said. Like, to me, it feels like this title is aimed at a very different audience than what the Switch is supposed to be aimed at. It's not the same type of audience, which is why, from the Nintendo point of view, this makes a lot of sense to release something like this on Switch as an exclusive, because it onboards like a lot of players who would not have bought the Switch in the first place, people like us, basically. But, you know, if it's a 30 FPS title, they might actually miss the boat here. If it's a 30 FPS title, they might not onboard as many players as they thought they would, because the fact that it's already multiplayer focused game, then already you're taking away a lot of the casual audience that are not interested in multiplayer, and then you have the hardcore the hardcore From Software players that are left. The one that enjoy the PvP and multiplayer, and then now you're throwing these people off and disappointing them with that 30 FPS, and you're likely indicating to them that this multiplayer title will not be worth it because it's 30 FPS. And again, you know, Bloodborne released at 30 FPS 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we got Bloodborne at 30 FPS. And back then, the multiplayer was pretty terrible, mainly due to the 30 FPS. And the reason why the 30 FPS made the multiplayer unplayable is that you got a lot of delay in Bloodborne, like very high delay. So much so that you'd get significant desyncs between the players, like on a regular, even players that you had a good connection with. Because 30 FPS is just not enough to like update each other's game, so that the latency or like the player hits between each other is like updated fast enough for it to feel nice. So in Bloodborne, you have no notion of spacing, basically, because the frame rate simply will not allow it. And again, that was 10 years ago. You know, 10 years ago, we didn't complain about it much. And also because Bloodborne, really, like, if you play Bloodborne, you're mainly playing Bloodborne for the single player, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of players that have played Bloodborne for the multiplayer. And again, 10 years ago. Now we're in 2025, so releasing a PvP-focused title or a multiplayer-focused title 10 years after that, still at 30 FPS? That can't be right. Let me read chat a little bit. Chirico, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime, by the way. Really appreciate that. Still remember, for G, the Canadian servers had 100 millisecond and the USA one had 30. Yeah. Well, I mean, Canada is vast though on GUN, and since I'm East Coast, I'm basically like 5 hours by car to New York. Like, if I was to drive to New York, it's gonna take me like 5 hours. Like, I just go down like in a straight line on the map, and then I get to New York. That, you know, I'm East Coast, so like, I think it's like the Virginia servers are basically like geographically like very close to me. That's why that happens. So that's why I also have a really good connection with most of the world. I'm like at a really prime spot because, you know, since I'm East Coast, I'm close like geographically speaking, to Europe, whereas if I was West Coast, that'd be very far from Europe. And then again, being East Coast makes me like have a decent connection with Europe, all the West side, and then, you know, all the US. So that's already like a large portion of players. 30 FPS with 300 milliseconds of input delay and Wi-Fi with even more input lag, plus 60 milliseconds if they had frame gen to get to 60 FPS. That will play worse than Google Stadia? Yeah, I'm very curious. The fact that it was originally designed for the Switch 1 makes you hopeful about the FPS. Yeah, if you want a silver lining, at first it was being worked on by a small team as a title for the Nintendo Switch. However, just as the game started to take shape, we were approached by Nintendo with talk of the Switch 2. I find this to be quite confusing because they were making a multiplayer focused game for one of the worst multiplayer capable hardware that's out there. And I'm not just talking about the FPS there. Like, if you are to play like any online game on the Switch, from what I've been told, it's basically unplayable. Like the Switch really, like the Switch 1 really has like horrible online capabilities. So the fact that they were designing this for that hardware, I find this confusing. You know, now that they, like after they approached it for Switch 2, I mean, that's for sure good news that they were going from planning for Switch 1 to Switch 2, like they're gonna have more headroom. With that being said though, if they don't use that headroom for 60 FPS, gonna be wasted. If they launch 30 FPS in 2026 PvP, then and that would be the worst decision they could ever do. Hey man, we definitely agree on that. There's no doubt about that. Like if they actually decide to do that, that would be like an incredibly bad decision. Gee, you seriously underestimate the From Software glazers? What I don't underestimate though is how clueless From Software is. Like, I know the casuals see From Software as like this almighty company that, you know, only shits out gold. But, you know, over the years, if you've played these games, gotten good at them, and gotten to a level where you understand the decision making or lack thereof, you would realize that they don't always know what they're doing with their decision, especially when it comes to the multiplayer stuff, right? And so when I look at this and I'm looking at someone like Miyazaki who's directing this project, right? Miyazaki is really good at what he does. Very, like, he's an artistic director, that's what he is. And he's very good at art directing, like very good at that. But when he's directing, because he's not just art directing, he's mostly directing entire project. When he's directing a multiplayer title or a PvP title, and has no interest, as you will read later on in this interview, in PvP games, it's not really hard to see why they overlook simple facts like games releasing on 30 FPS when it's a multiplayer title. Because maybe for him, like, you know, when he plays a game, he doesn't really see much of the difference between 30 and 60 FPS. Because Miyazaki is not like as much of a hardcore gamer, he's more like a creator. Which is fine for his role as an artistic director, but when it comes to directing games like this, if you overlook simple aspects like 30 FPS, which is the case with a lot of these developers and directors, like the reason why you see some games being released at 30 is because the creators themselves don't see much of a problem with that. Because they're not as gamers as you guys and I, basically. Like, they don't really see much of a difference when they play at 30 FPS. What good dev would think of making a fighting game with 30 FPS on mainly Wi-Fi device was a good idea. Same guy that created Blind Spot, that's for sure. Yeah. Oh boy. We will see. Luckily, we won't have to bother with this shit until 2026. Yeah. Man. Why are people speculating that it's 30 FPS? Yo, what's up, Rex? How you doing, bro? Basically, Digital Foundry confirmed that the internal frame rate or the internal resolution for the Duskblood announcement was 1080p, and that the internal frame rate was 30 FPS. So even if you got a 30 FPS feed for the trailer, the internal frame rate is 30 FPS basically, according to Digital Foundry metric. You can see it here.
After we film this, we shall know one way or the other. But let's talk about Elden Ring.
But yeah, that's what we got. Obviously, it's not like hard confirmation, but it's as close as you would get really to a hard confirmation. Because logically speaking, you don't really showcase or reveal showcase of a game here when it's not in its best possible state. So the fact that this was showcased at 30 either indicates that, you know, this will be a 30 FPS title, or maybe you still have the slim possibility that you could, you know, get that game to be like 720p, kick in some DLSS, and then I don't know, maybe get that to 40 in the best case scenario, but I'm just speculating. From what we know, this is a 30 FPS title so far. I think it's better that your outlook is that this will be a 30 FPS title, because everything seems to indicate that so far. Which is pretty damn bad, honestly. Like, by the way, another good reason to you know, like another good reason to talk about this is that there's still a year left before they release this game. And so if people complain enough about the 30 FPS, you know, it's not completely impossible that they might like try to change course and put all their effort into running this at 60, you know. All the jokes we were making throughout the years are becoming true. Yeah, that's true. Like, I'm playing on the Wii U, fucking McDonald's, Wi-Fi, Fortnite Souls, yeah. Well, does Wi-Fi really add that much more delay, though? I remember as a kid playing Halo C on a LAN Wi-Fi party, perfectly remember having like 0 ping. Well, you were in a LAN though. Like, if you're playing on a LAN event, like the latency, like, you have to understand, like, Wi-Fi adds a little bit of latency, but does not add that much latency. The problem with Wi-Fi is that it works until it doesn't. Like, you have to understand, hardwired, the advantage of hardwired is that the signal passes directly through the wire from point A to point B, one end to the other. No fluff, nothing, just information passing in a straight line, so to speak. Whereas with Wi-Fi, information basically is sent as a broad signal, and then that broad signal, imagine it, like, picture it in your head like a sonar, right? Like, you have the sound wave, you know, of the sonar, like, going into the ocean. But the sonar basically indicates you when there's something in between. So, like, if you use your sonar, you're gonna know if there's another ship nearby, if there's a large animal, like a whale or something. That's basically what happens with Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi sends the signal, and then the signal bounces off the things that are around. Except the problem is that, unlike at sea, in your living room or wherever you live, there's a lot of objects, interference. There's also a lot of other signals that are going around, so that you don't just have like one sonar isolated. You basically have a bunch of signals, bunch of Wi-Fi that's going on, especially if you live in a city. So every time you play on Wi-Fi, you have a very high chance that information is not gonna make it certain times. so that you're basically sending a signal and, oh, for some reason there's some interference with another object or another signal, and then the information doesn't make it. What does it translate to? It means that in-game you're going to be dropping packets because the packet simply never makes it to its destination. So that basically introduces straight lag. And that lag is not present if the information makes it through. So Wi-Fi works until it doesn't. So usually, again, Wi-Fi adds a little latency because it's not a direct connection like an Ethernet cable, sorry. So it adds a little delay, but not much with the new Wi-Fi tech. But the nature of Wi-Fi will never change. You're never going to get that stability with Wi-Fi. It's just the nature of things. So Wi-Fi works until it doesn't. It always has been like that. So if you actually like take the time to test your Wi-Fi connection, you might realize that, hey, you know, my Wi-Fi connection is basically the same as my wired connection. I don't know what's the fuss all about, because it works until it doesn't. Until you have interference, it's going to look practically the same. But in practice, it's virtually impossible to not have interference. It's going to happen at some point because you do not live in a vacuum. You have other objects. You have a cell phone. You have neighbors. You know, there's a bunch of things going on. So yeah, that's the thing with Wi-Fi. I hope that answers your question. They hit a lot of notes right, but they basically overlook basic stuff. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Miyazaki won't even survive one PvP session. Well, you say that, but let's keep on reading. They talk about superhero abilities. Let's see. Game characters and setting. Superhuman abilities and opportunistic behavior. What are some characteristics of the Bloodsworn? So basically, the characters you see there are... It's a hero game, right? So it's not like the usual From Software. It's a hero game. You pick your hero, and then you can customize them a little bit. But basically, just like Night Rain, it's a hero game. So these are called Bloodsworn. The Bloodsworn possess superhuman abilities thanks to their special bloods. So their actions are more dramatic than anything seen in their previous titles. Even basic character action in this game, such as sprinting, super jump, and double jump, are designed to be dramatic and stress-free, and are complemented by each other's characters' own unique weapons and abilities, allowing for a wide range of creativity. So already with that paragraph, what they're saying is this is not going to be the usual From Software combat that you know and love. They're basically going full anime on this. So unfortunately, Super Jump PvP sounds like a horrible game design. Thanks, ma'am. Stress-free RNG PvP. Man, this sounds like it's really hitting off the mark. Also, while this isn't directly related to the Bloodsworn themselves, the setting allows for the depiction of firearms such as and every character is equipped with some means of attacking from a distance. I feel like this is one of the game's unique aspects when compared with our previous titles. I hope these new action elements are one areas that player will enjoy. So here you go, guys. You have a game where projectiles are at the forefront more than they've ever been before. You have a game where basic movement has been cranked to 100 with over-the-top abilities. Basically, what you have is a hero shooter. Honestly, like, that's what it sounds like. You basically have a hero shooter with honestly, like, I'm finding that instead of embracing their strengths for their PvP, they're really leaning a lot more toward the hero shooter genre, instead of leaning toward what made them unique for the PvP aspect. Like, they're really going hero shooter here. A 30 FPS, $580 hero shooter. That's what this is. I'm gonna be honest, man. Like, I was excited for this game, but I think it was short-lived with the new information that we're getting. Unfortunately, it's not the game I was looking for. They have no ideas where their PvP is unique. Yeah, they don't, unfortunately. By the way, as far as the hero are concerned, you refer to protagonist as plural. Does this mean that the player will be able to choose multiple different characters? Yes, there are over a dozen characters for the player to choose from, each with their own identity and appearance. I think there is a lot of unique elements to the character design and the weapons they use, so hopefully players can find one or two favorites among them. Also, each character can be customized to a certain extent, allowing players the fun of building a character that feels their own. So at least there's still some customization for the characters, but yeah. Can you provide some more detail on general gameplay loop? The game has so-called hub area, just like every other Souls game, where the player can choose their character, customize them, and enter online multiplayer. That basically sounds like Night Rain with PvP, really. Online multiplayer supports up to 8 players. Upon concluding an online match, players then return to the hub, at which point they receive some sort of reward, whether they win or lose. Basically like Night Rain. Using these rewards, player can further customize their character, and so the cycle continues. Online matches are generally last player standing. However, there are certain cases where victory conditions differ. For example, player may be tasked with teaming up to take down a powerful boss enemy, or find themselves in other special circumstances. So it's basically a free-for-all at the core, with some twist that involves like teaming up with other people. So victory conditions are influenced not just by PvP, but PvE. That's right, some victory conditions center around defeating a boss enemy. I'm happy you say that. Regardless of whether it's PvP or PvE, the idea is to provide players with an experience that allows them to learn and hone their skills as they play. We've therefore designed the PvE boss encounter to present a tough challenge and a sense of accomplishment upon defeating them. So players can also enjoy improving their own skill as they battle. Yes, although there are a variety of elements in place that keep the game from becoming too stoic. For example, how players conduct themselves during a match is just as important as direct combat. So you're gonna get points for emoting. Oh man, the Duskbloods implements victory points, which are responsible for ultimately deciding the outcome of a match. To obtain victory points, direct combat is of course important, but it's not the only way. Some players may prefer to earn points by avoiding direct combat and instead engage in more opportunistic behavior. How you earn points is entirely up to you. Shitpots are worth 100 points style. I wish. Additionally, each character can summon an entity to assist in combat, giving players high degree of freedom when it comes to how they fight and win. So basically, you have like a PvE summon of your own. And we all know that PvE summons make fucking Elden Ring amazing, right? Like, PvE summons in Elden Ring, NPC summons are basically the best part of the multiplayer. Everyone knows that. Yeah, that's, by the way, guys, you know, in Elden Ring, we have Spirit Summons Arena, and, you know, just saying that, like, it makes me wonder, why is the Spirit Summon the least popular and not played mode at all in the arena? Why is that? Why does no one play Spirit Summon in Arena? Well, it's because they prefer without them. That's why. So again, just missing the mark for what is, you know, PvP supposed to be, like what is supposed to be PvP designed here. That's not what PvP is about. Asmund Gold loved it though. Yeah, do you see him playing it right now? I don't think he plays it. You know, you can play it once. That doesn't really mean you love it, even though you say you love it. If you play it once and then you never touch it again, you didn't really love it. Another important aspect is match variables, such as the event system. This system has the potential to alter the course of the match, such as special enemy spawns, additional objective, accompanying bonus reward. In the trailer, you may have noticed a giant stone face looming in the sky. This is one of the example of the events that can occur in a match. In this case, the appearance of this stone face affects the environment and changes match reward, which can have an immediate impact on player motivations and objective. These events don't happen all the time, and I hope discovering them gives players more incentive to keep coming back. It sounds like even those who tend to shy away from PvP can still enjoy themselves. That was the intention. I personally am not much of a PvP person, and I wanted to make something satisfying even for players like me. So there you have it, a PvP focused game designed by someone who is not a PvP person, who wanted to satisfy their own taste. Which there's nothing wrong with that, but again, making a PvP game not by a PvP person is going to result in a 30 FPS Switch game with range focused combat. While the goal of a match is to obtain first blood, there are personal objectives that provide separate rewards to the player as well. So I hope these add to the fun of each engagement. What other ways might players enjoy the game outside of combat? One thing I love doing in any game I direct is leaving fragments of lore, blah blah blah. However, we've gone about it a little differently from previous titles. These fragments are found in character customization items. Okay. You customize their blood history and fate. Yes. Analyzing and altering a character's blood history and fate allows the player to customize all sorts of things from their ability, appearance, and inner characteristics. Do you mind sharing any other points you personally find interesting? I haven't talked about roles. In online play, roles give players special responsibilities and objectives that often lead to unique interaction and relationships between players based on their corresponding roles. That's probably not much info to go on, so allow me to provide a few examples, but please note, we're still finalizing some of the naming and details. For example, if a player possesses the destined rival role, another player is designed as their rival, and they are tasked with finding and defeating that player. Doing so counts as achieving a personal goal, separate from the overall victory condition. Another example is Destined Companion, where one player is required to seek out another designated as their companion, which result in a special reward if they form a bond with another player. So basically, when we start the match, Mongus and I are basically this Destined Companion, and we have to meet up in order to beat everyone else. That's basically what it sounds like. Roles can be assigned to any character via blood customization, allowing players to enjoy role-playing in a literal sense, and hopefully adding to the drama of these engagements. You know, I appreciate that they're trying to add like some little twist in there. You know, it might make things interesting, but here you go. That's pretty much the gist of it. Like, this is basically the Firekeeper, for those wondering. That's what he says in this part of this article. Yo, what's up, Castle? Is this a Nintendo From Software game? How far we've fallen? What are you talking about? I've been playing on Wii U this whole time. There's nothing new here. Cause, thank you so much for the resub for 17 months, man. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, point down is minus 100 social credits. Not plus, minus. Honestly, the FPS being 30 is the only thing that pisses you off. Yeah, me too. You know, even if I'm not really a big fan of like hero shooter, and that's basically the route they're taking, I would be willing to you know, to give the game a chance, but it's gonna be hard to give the game a chance if it wasn't like, you know, if it's not, if it's 30 FPS, it's gonna be hard to enjoy. Like simply put, it's in this, you know, in this era, it's gonna be hard to enjoy a 30 FPS game, 30 FPS multiplayer game for that matter, and even more than that, a 30 FPS multiplayer game that has a, you know, a strong melee stagger base system in place. So if you don't have like instantaneous response between your hits in a game like these, or in games like these in From Software games, you feel that even more than in shooting games. So maybe that's why they're going the more range combat approach, maybe to circumvent that. Multiplayer should be minimum 120 FPS these days. Well, the current hardware doesn't support 120 FPS easily. You can do it. There's a lot of games that support 120 FPS, but like, you know, the games that have that are games that have very optimized engine for the type of games, and you know, very capable full team of employees. Like we're talking like the people who make Doom, people who make Call of Duty. No, these are like the 120 FPS titles. You can't expect every game to have these sort of resources. But hopefully that's the future we're heading toward. 120 FPS as a standard for sure. Yeah, what Virgil is saying, even if your net is good, others will still be playing on Wi-Fi. So even if you use the docked switch or the docked mode for the switch and plug in an Ethernet cable, you're still going to be fighting others that are not doing that. Others that are playing on Wi-Fi. 30 is criminal. 30 FPS, Bloodborne, 10 years old. 10 years old, and also it was mainly a single player focused title. Now we're 10 years later, we're getting a 30 FPS title, multiplayer focused. Which is fucking crazy. But yeah, here you go, guys. By the way, I'm going to reiterate the reason why we say 30 FPS is Digital Foundry has done a internal resolution and internal frame rate analysis of the announced trailers, and they're basically showing that the reveal of the game was 1080p 30 FPS. So it's not confirmed 100%. Like, it's not like Nintendo or From Software came out and said it. But it's, you know, it's as confirmed as you're going to get from an outside source, let's say. Again, it's not like set in stone. For instance, a scenario would be, this is 1080p 30 FPS. You might be able to downscale, or let's just lower the resolution to 720p. Let's say the Switch 2 has some sort of DLSS built in, and then maybe you can get your FPS to like an unsteady like 45 FPS that way. Maybe, you know, that's like just speculation, but in the best case scenario, what this means is if this is 1080p 30, you're not gonna magically have more FPS than that. Like the other likely scenario would be that, you know, you might get a little more power docked. If you lower to 720p, you might get a little more, but even then, it's not gonna account for the CPU basically. So yeah, I think it's more reasonable that you set your expectation for this game to be releasing at 30 FPS, because as of right now, all indicates that this is what it's going to be. And again, if, again, I'm going to repeat that, if the Switch 2 is on par spec-wise as the PS4 or the PS4 Pro, keep in mind Dark Souls 3 ran at unsteady 30 FPS on on the PS4. So did Bloodborne. And then on the PS4 Pro, Bloodborne ran at a more steady 30 FPS, and then Dark Souls 3 ran at a 45 FPS to 50 FPS in like areas where there was basically not a lot of things. So you're looking at games that From Software has made in the past, and the hardware spec of the Switch 2, or the ballpark of what the hardware has for the Switch 2, you're looking at games that basically range between 25 to 45 FPS. That's the range that you're looking at for the capabilities of the Switch. So with all that being said, that reinforces that this game will be 30 FPS. Again, it's not confirmed 100%, but that's the likely scenario here. What Nintendo needs to do for this is they need to come out and say we have a performance mode where you can activate DLSS or maybe even FrameGen. I don't know what kind of tech they have on this. You can play on docked mode on lower resolution with DLSS and reach 60 FPS. That's what they need to do to basically please us, right? Because, you know, there's always this saying that you can never please everyone and whatever. Well, that's how you'd please us. Just announce that it is possible to play this at 60 FPS. It's that simple. FrameGen causes input delay, sadly. Yeah. It does. 30 and 40 is the DLSS performance mode. Dude, that would be bad. Last thing I want is FrameGen in a competitive game. Although, to be fair, this is not a competitive game. I forgot where I saw that, but this was advertised as more of a party chill game. I think it was in this interview somewhere. Like, it's more a stress-free, I think he calls it. It's a stress-free game. It's just for fun, bro. It's just for fun. Why do you care so much about 30 FPS? It's just for fun, bro. Right now, here the Rogue Ally is 599 euros. I mean, I'm not gonna argue here that there is not better handheld than the Switch. Like, honestly, first of all, I have no idea how the handheld market is shaping up or anything like that. But that's what we know so far about this. Don't worry, it will run perfect on the Switch 2 Pro. Quick question about that. Like I said, I'm not really aware of the type of hardware that they're releasing. So does anyone know if like the first Switch had like different versions of it coming out? Like, did they come out with like a Switch and then like a Switch OLED later, which had like more power? Is that something that they did? Like like, you know, with PS4 we got the PS4, then we get the PS4 Pro. With PS5 we had the PS5 and then the PS5 Pro. Does the Switch have a Pro version with more power, or is it like just another Switch with OLED? No change on hardware. Okay, there you go. It's just OLED. Okay, well, they're gonna do the same thing, by the way, because the Switch 2 has an LCD screen, and then the last Switch has an OLED, so you can assume that they're gonna come out with another Switch 2 with OLED eventually. Well, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, like, I was looking forward to this. If it's 30 FPS, I'm not sure I will be getting this. At 30 FPS, it seems like it's a hard sell, you know, like spending that much money on a game that not a lot of people will be playing and not a lot of people will be interested in. Like, on one hand, I might be the only content creator that plays it if I buy that. But on the other hand, if no one's interested in it, it will be hard to make that money back, you know, from streaming and everything. Like, if I buy all of that, it's going to cost me, like, seriously, like, around $1,000 Canadian. And I don't know about you guys, but, you you know, that's a lot of money. You'll get it. Stop capping. Hey, man, you don't know me. I did not get Sekiro. Why would I get that? I'm not that type of guy. I don't get everything from Soft. Some of you are, not me, though. And, you know, I say that for someone that's streaming and making revenue off of these games, right? Could you imagine the people who are not making any revenue off of this and have to justify buying a Switch just to play this? That's a hard sell, dude. Like, I don't care who you are. That's a lot of money to cash in for one game. Like, that's seriously a lot of money for one game. Like I said, for me, like, the reason why this is possible is because I'm streaming this, so I'm gonna make that money back if the content performs well enough. But that's still a lot of investment, even for me who might make that money back. So I can't imagine for someone who's not someone who's not making any money off of that, like, they're not gonna make that money back. Like, they have to justify paying that much for 30 FPS multiplayer that they're not sure they're gonna enjoy because it's a completely different direction. It's not like before where you can just like say, you know, I'll try it. You know, it's only the price of a game. I'll just give it a shot. That's not really the case anymore. Like, now you're making a commitment. Like, you're making a commitment with your wallet. So if you don't like it, it's a hard blow if you don't like it. Because, you know, it's possible that you like it. It's possible that you don't like it. But when you learn that it's likely 30 FPS, then the chances of you not liking it or being aggravated with aspects of the game that are due to the limitations are higher, really. 30 FPS is insane for that much money. That's what I'm thinking too, but yeah. That's sad, dude. Like, I was actually looking forward to this. That's really sad. Also, you can't believe this is the next big project that Miyazaki was working on. No, actually, about that, it's not. We pretty much get confirmation here. Let's see. So at first, it was being worked on by a small team as a title for Nintendo Switch. So there you go. It was never really a mainline project. However, just as the game started to take shape, we were approached by Nintendo with talk of a Switch 2, which led us to revamp our development path with new hardware in mind. So there you have it here. Worked on by a small team for a Nintendo Switch. I find this crazy. I need to re-look at that. Like, this was developed for the base Switch. So on one hand, the fact that they have the new Switch 2 hardware there, they might be able to make it work at 60 because they were trying to make this work at 30 on the older system. Although if they're lazy, you know, they were targeting 30 FPS from the very start, right? So look at it this way. There is no way they were targeting 60 FPS to start with if this was developed for the Switch, like what he's saying. There's no way the target FPS for the base Nintendo Switch was 60. They were targeting 30 to start with for this game. So keep that in mind. 60 FPS was never the target. It's basically like impossible with the base Switch hardware. So now that they basically, afterward, they were approached by Nintendo with talks of the Switch 2, which led them to revamp their development path with the new hardware in mind. So you can look at it two ways. Either their original target has always been 30, so the Switch 2 just means that, you know, they're going to have an easier time reaching that, and they're going to be able to have better visual fidelity. Or you can look at it, well, the new hardware is going to allow them to go beyond 30 because originally they were planning to do 30 on much lesser hardware. Now that they have better hardware, they might be able to pull off 60. So these are the two ways you can look at it. If you want to be positive, you can say that originally this was targeted for the normal Switch, so it's definitely possible to have higher FPS on better hardware. The captures on dock mode, G? Oh yeah, for sure it would be on dock mode. Like, you don't want to showcase your game in the like a subpar state. Like, you want to showcase your game in its best state, which means any game that comes out on multi-platform is going to be showcased on PC on a 4090 or a 5090, because you want your game to have like the best visual, the most stable frame rate and everything. But when it comes to exclusive titles, you know, you're not going to showcase a PlayStation exclusive game on PC. You're going to showcase a PlayStation exclusive game on PlayStation. Just like the Switch here, they're not showcasing this game on PC. They're showcasing this game on the Switch. But they would surely give themselves the best possible presentation by having the dock mode with the power plugged in. You know, you would assume so. So they're making a PvP game that appeals to neither the PvP audience nor the PvE audience. Yeah, that's basically what it sounds like, man. That's fucked up. That is really strange. Yeah. That is really strange, sorry. Yeah. Well, I guess that's the info we got today. It is actually insane. So, as a concept though, you know, the whole PvPvE was something I was eagerly looking forward to. That's something I wanted From Software to do for a while. But oh well. This won't be the one. A dead rat. Let's take it. Here's a dead rat. Take it. Oh, man. Appreciate what you got. Here's a dead rat. What a classic. Yeah, the rat is the firekeeper too. Yeah. At least this wasn't one of the main project. Yeah, at least. The silver lining is that FromSoft is willing to experiment with PvPvE. Well, Vulture, there's two ways to look at that. Either, like you said, you know, at least they're willing to experiment and have some interest in PvP. Or the other ways you can look at it, you know, they had one bullet to try that, and they just fired like completely off. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we have this one thing we want to try. Let's see if it works out or not. Oof, it doesn't work out. Let's not do that again. That's also what might happen. So no waifu firekeeper, that's a downgrade. Yeah, he also says that this is an old man. Getting tired of waiting for a From Software game just to be disappointed every time for the last 6 years. Yeah, I know, Castle. I know, man. It's like, I'm telling you, dude, it's not gonna come from Software, like the game you're looking for. It's not gonna come from them. They've strayed away from the path of making compelling gameplay. They're going like the anime route. They're straying away from their grounded roots. Like the hardcore medieval inspired fantasy like boots on ground melee combat is far behind now. Like they're going into the more like anime backflips, special effects route. Unfortunately for us. Lords of the Fallen Tree is going to save us. Yes, it will. Although to be fair, you know, if there's anything to go by, the Lords of the Fallen devs, well, they don't really have, they're basically in the same, they have the same problem as FromSoft because their director has no idea about PvP or how to make it. At least they're more they're not as deaf as FromSoft when it comes to feedback. Like they're more open for feedback, or easier to give feedback to. At least not because of the, partly because of the lack of language barrier, but yeah. That's that. Yeah, No Rest for the Wicked might actually have decent PvP. I might actually look into it. I was interested in playing that. I never actually gave it a shot because Elden Ring kept coming out with new patches, but new patches that gave us a lot of hope, fixed some issues and created others. Oh man. If slides of PvP existed, that could be cool too. You know, that's one thing. I feel like I have a more fate toward Korean devs to make good PvP. But on the other hand, that PvP game would likely be filled with microtransaction. But if we get a PvP game in the veins of what we're looking for, I have a hunch that it might come from Korea. Or maybe China, but China also seems to be like going toward the path of like flashy stuff, anime stuff, which is not necessarily what we're looking for, but either way, we're just talking just to talk at this point. Dark Souls 2 is kind of anime, but it was still super grounded, very D&D. After that, it was a turning point. End of an old era with Elden Ring now and its big flashy stuff, low skill floor. Yes, I absolutely agree with everything you said. Dark Souls 2 was indeed kind of anime, but still super grounded, very Dungeons and Dragon inspired. Which was the, to me, like at the beginning, this is what is appealing, that fantasy D&D like DNA, and From Software is straying away from that. FromSoft is even unwilling to implement really simple fixes for AC6, which was designed as a PvP game. Well, I'll say one thing: AC6 had a massive design flaw that you can't fix. Like the whole no turning speed and lock on makes the PvP unplayable no matter what kind of balance changes you make to the game. Even if you have the game super balanced, the core fundamental of the game is skillless. So you can't fix AC6 PvP. And also, most players don't play AC6 PvP anymore because most players have realized that this is unsalvageable. And so the incentive for From Software to fix anything is really not there, honestly. So I don't blame them for leaving AC6 to basically rot here in the corner. They might make more PvE content for it, though. I think people would probably still come back for the PvE content, but PvP-wise, it was a huge miss. Yeah, guys. Sad gaming news today, I guess. We got a little reality check. Not get too excited for this, unfortunately. Still waiting for Oblivion remake mod, and also the official Oblivion remake. I'm still eagerly waiting for both of those. If the actual official remake is not good, I'm confident that I will enjoy the Oblivion remake mod, though, made by dedicated members of the modding community. I'm very eager to play that. I'm definitely going to stream that. I'm going to play this, and I'm definitely going to enjoy at least the mod aspect of it. But hopefully the official remake is good too. You're glad the exclusive is not a main Souls game? They wouldn't do that. That would be just stupid. They wouldn't do that. They would lose money. Like the exclusivity deal would have to be like stupid. Like stupidly like massive for this to ever happen. And I'm not even sure FromSoft would do it just purely because that would hurt their brand at that point. Even just this. Like, this title is actually causing a lot of damage. If you look at the public perception of this title, it's not good, man. It's not good. So here you go, guys. Lots of new info. Lots of bad info. Not looking good for Duskblood. Well, guys, I think that's going to be it for today. We went over everything. And, pretty disappointed. You know, a PvPvE game is a game that's basically a From Software PvPvE game is a game that's that's made for me. But a 30 FPS game, a 30 FPS multiplayer game in 2025 is not something that that I'm looking forward to, unfortunately. Also, the fact that I have to buy a whole new system for that, it's very unfortunate. By the way, throughout this entire interview, there was no confirmation that this was an always online game, or if there was a way to play this single player. There was no confirmation of that anywhere. I'm assuming it's always online or requires an online connection, but it's hard to know. If you guys have that info, I'd love to know. But again, we still have a year to learn if it's 100% guaranteed to be 30 FPS. So far, it indicates that it will be, but it's not 100% confirmed. So technically, if you want to cope, there's still hope. Well, guys, I think that's going to be it for me today. We went over everything. Anyone else want to share anything before we leave? Feel free. I really wish there was an easy way to provide From Software feedback. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately. Shout out to Oblivion. Yeah. Yeah, I'm hyped for that too, baby turtle. At least we have something to look forward to, man. Happy about that. It's very likely 30 FPS on dock mode. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, while it's not confirmed, this is 30 FPS dock mode. Yeah, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Maybe we'll get 45. Yeah, again, it's possible, but yeah, here you go. 45 FPS frame gen. Well, guys, in the meantime, have a good one, everyone, and I'll catch you guys up next time. Take care, guys.